Kari stood at the center of the sprawling, manicured lawn, a borrowed crystal flute of $150 a bottle Dom Perignon feeling alien in his work-calloused hand. He was 38 years old today. His salary as a foreman at the Greenville textile mill was a steady $62,000 a year, an honest living that paid the mortgage on their modest North Main home and kept their 2018 Honda CR-V running. But here, at his mother-in-law's $1.2 million Augusta Road manor, surrounded by people in $3,000 suits and glittering jewelry, his $62,000 a year felt like pocket change. This was not his world. It was Marissa's, and her mother, Lorraine's. The late September air was warm, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and freshly cut grass. Tiny white lights were strung through the ancient oak trees, casting a soft glow on the faces of Greenville's minor royalty. Marissa, his wife of 10 years, raised her own glass. She looked stunning in a silk dress the color of cream, a $2,800 piece she'd bought for the occasion. Her beautiful, deep brown skin was luminous under the fairy lights. "If I could have everyone's attention," she called out, her voice smooth and practiced. A hush fell over the 50 or so guests. "I'd like to propose a toast to my husband, Kari." He offered her a small, controlled smile. He knew what was coming. He had known for 6 days, 3 hours, and 14 minutes. Marissa's eyes, usually warm, held a cool, theatrical glint. "Kari is a simple man, a good man. He taught me so much over the last decade." She paused, letting the sentiment hang in the air. "He taught me what security feels like. But more importantly," she took a deliberate breath, her gaze sweeping over her audience, "he taught me what I don't want in life." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Kari remained perfectly still, his eyes locked on hers. He could feel the vibration of the bass from the string quartet near the patio. He could smell the seared scallops from the catering station. He cataloged every sensory detail, anchoring himself to the moment. "He taught me that being comfortable is a cage," Marissa continued, her voice gaining strength, turning from a toast into a proclamation. "That a life without ambition is a life half-lived. And so, for his 38th birthday, I'm giving him the greatest gift I could possibly give." She turned her body fully toward him, her smile a sharp, polished weapon. "I'm giving him his freedom. I've spoken to my attorney. I am filing for divorce." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical thing, pressing in on all sides. Every eye was on Kari, waiting for him to shatter. They expected shouting, pleading, or the raw, open wound of humiliation. And then, from the head table where she sat enthroned, his mother-in-law, Lorraine, began to clap. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, precise, and utterly devastating. A slow, deliberate clap, clap, clap of victory. It sliced through the shocked silence and gave a few of her closest friends permission to offer weak, uncertain applause of their own. Marissa's triumphant smile widened. She had done it. She had publicly executed their marriage and made him the pathetic victim in her grand narrative of self-actualization. Kari took a slow, deliberate sip of his champagne. The bubbles fizzed on his tongue. He lowered the glass, met his wife's expectant, cruel gaze, and gave her a single, quiet nod. "Approved," he said. His voice was not loud, but in the ringing silence it carried to every corner of the lawn. "Approved," he repeated, a little louder this time, for the people in the back. "My attorney filed the petition this morning at 9:15 a.m. The server should be at your mother's front door on Monday with your copy." He placed his untouched flute of champagne on the tray of a passing waiter, turned his back on his wife's perfectly sculpted mask of disbelief, and walked away, leaving the ruins of his birthday party smoking behind him. The life Kari and Marisa had built was a carefully constructed facade, and he had been its primary and most willing architect. Their home on North Main was a charming 1,800 square foot brick bungalow he'd inherited from his grandmother, free and clear. When they married, he'd insisted on taking out a $350,000 mortgage against it, a cash-out refinance Marisa and Lorraine had convinced him was a savvy financial move. The money had paid for a new slate roof on Lorraine's manor, a $70,000 kitchen remodel for their own home that Marisa designed but never cooked in, and a seed investment for one of Lorraine's friends' failed startups. Kari made the $2,100 monthly mortgage payment himself, directly from his paycheck. A typical Tuesday morning started at 5:30 a.m. Kari would wake in the quiet dark, the scent of lavender from Marisa's side of the bed, a sleepy comfort. He'd dress in his simple work uniform, steel-toed boots, $140 from Red Wing, durable khaki pants, $55 from Carhartt, and a navy blue polo shirt with the Mills logo embroidered on the chest. In the kitchen, he'd pack his lunch in a beat-up metal lunchbox that had belonged to his father. 2 sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos of black coffee. The entire meal cost less than $3. Marisa would drift in around 7:45 a.m., wrapped in a $400 silk robe, her intricate braids piled high on her head. Her skin, a deep, radiant brown, seemed to glow even in the soft morning light. "Morning, baby," she'd murmur, pouring herself a glass of filtered water from the $600 refrigerator. She never drank coffee. "Bad for the enamel," she'd say. She'd watch him pack his lunch with a look that was a mixture of affection and pity. "You know, the cafeteria at my firm has a fantastic salad bar. You should let me give you some money for a proper lunch." Her law firm, where she was a paralegal, was a sleek glass tower downtown. Her salary was $58,000 a year, nearly identical to his, yet their financial lives were galaxies apart. "I like my sandwiches," he'd say, closing the clasp on his lunchbox. It was a familiar dance. His life was about maintenance. He fixed the dripping faucet under the sink, a $5 washer saving them a $200 plumber visit. He mowed the lawn every Saturday with the 15-year-old Craftsman mower from Sears. He changed the oil in her white BMW 3 Series, a car with a $1,200 monthly lease payment that was a constant source of tension. "It's about image, Kari," she'd explained when she got it. "You have to look successful to be successful." He would just nod, wondering when his steady paycheck and the solid roof over their heads had stopped counting as success. Their evenings were a study in contrasts. He'd come home smelling of machine oil and industrial starch, his body tired from a 10-hour shift on the concrete floor of the mill. He'd find her on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, the living room filled with the scent of a $90 diptyque candle. On the coffee table would be a new purchase, a pair of $950 Christian Louboutin shoes, a $1,800 Louis Vuitton handbag. "Just a little something to cheer myself up," she'd say, barely looking up. "Lorraine's fundraiser is next week, and I can't be seen in last season's accessories." He never argued. He'd just go into the kitchen and start dinner. He was a good cook, a skill learned from his mother. He'd make her favorite shrimp and grits, the kitchen filling with the warm, savory smells of home. She would eat a few bites, declare it delicious, baby, and then spend the rest of the evening on a conference call with her mother, planning some social event he had no interest in attending. He would do the dishes, watch an hour of television, usually a documentary about engineering or manufacturing, and be in bed by 10 p.m. It was a quiet, stable life. Or so he told himself. He was providing. He was a good husband. He had no idea how wrong he was. The cruelty hadn't started with the birthday party. It had been a slow, escalating campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts, each one designed to remind him of his place. The outrage had been accumulating in him for years, a silent pressure, building behind a dam of his own making. Lorraine was the master conductor of this symphony of condescension. She would visit their North Main home once a week, always unannounced. She'd sweep in, dressed in an $8,700 Armani suit, her presence immediately making their comfortable home feel small and shabby. She'd run a finger along a bookshelf, inspect it for dust, and sigh. "Marisa, darling, you must hire a better cleaning service. This simply won't do. A man's home is his castle, but it reflects on the queen." Kari would be in the backyard, trying to patch a fence. Lorraine would appear at the back door. "Kari, you're covered in dirt. You'll track it all through the house. Why don't you pay a handyman to do that? Surely you can spare a few $100s to save yourself the trouble." She knew exactly how much he made. The question was a jab, not a suggestion. The insults became more direct over time. Last Christmas, at her annual holiday gala, Kari had worn his best suit, a perfectly nice $600 navy wool suit from a local tailor. He felt confident. Then Lorraine had cornered him by the champagne fountain. "That's a very sturdy suit, Kari," she'd said, looking him up and down. "It reminds me of the uniforms the valets wear." She smiled, a tight, bloodless expression. "You know, I've been thinking. Marisa has such a bright future. She could be a partner one day, but she needs a husband who can move in the right circles, someone who adds to her prestige, not subtracts from it." He felt the heat rise in his collar. "I work hard, Lorraine. I provide for your daughter." "Providing is the bare minimum," she'd snapped, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "It's what laborers do. My daughter was meant for a life of influence, of elegance, not a life that smells of a factory floor." Marisa was more subtle, but just as cutting. Her cruelty was wrapped in the language of self-improvement and concern. One evening, about a year before the party, he came home excited. His boss had praised him, suggesting he was on track for a plant manager position in a few years. It would be a significant raise, maybe to $85,000 a year. He told her the news over the dinner he'd cooked. She listened, a thoughtful frown on her face. "That's nice, baby," she said, pushing a piece of salmon around her plate. "More responsibility at that old place." "It's a good career, Marisa. My father worked at that mill. It put food on our table, put me through technical college." "I know," she said softly. "And that was the most painful part, the softness. But don't you ever want more? My friend Jessica's husband just made partner at his law firm. They're buying a house at the Cliffs, a real house, Kari, with a view." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "I just worry that you're content, and contentment is where dreams go to die." His dream had been her, a family, a partnership. He was slowly realizing her dream was an escape route. The financial betrayals were constant. He'd come to find out, much later, that the seed investment for Lorraine's friend was actually just cash funneled back to Lorraine to cover her gambling debts from her monthly poker games. The $4,500 property tax bill for her manor that he'd paid, thinking it was a one-time emergency, had become an annual tradition, a line item in his budget she never acknowledged. He was the silent guarantor on her mortgage, a fact he'd almost forgotten. Years ago, when her husband passed away, she'd been refinancing. Kari's steady income and solid credit were needed to secure the loan. "It's just a formality, darling," she had cooed. "The bank just needs a man on the paperwork. You won't be responsible for a thing." It was a lie, one of many he had chosen to believe. The final piece, the one that broke the dam, happened a week before his birthday. He had come home early, his shift ending at 3 p.m. instead of 5. The house was quiet. He walked past Marisa's home office and heard her on the phone, her voice light and conspiratorial. He recognized the melodic cadence of her mother on the other end of the speakerphone. "And everyone will be there. Stephen from the board of the Peace Center, the Covingtons, everyone who matters, Lorraine was saying. It has to be perfect, Mom. Theatrics are everything. I want them to see me taking control of my life, Marisa replied. Just remember the lines we practiced. You're not leaving him. You're liberating yourself. It's empowering. I know. And the toast is the perfect moment. He'll be standing there, all smiles, so unsuspecting. Marisa let out a little laugh. Honestly, it'll be the best birthday gift I could give him. His freedom from a life he isn't equipped to improve. Lorraine's voice was pure poison. And it ensures everyone sees you as the one ending it. No one can whisper that a simple mill foreman left my daughter. You'll be a tragic hero. He'll be a footnote. Kari stood frozen in the hallway, his metal lunchbox growing heavy in his hand. A footnote? That's all he was. The foundation they had built everything on. The steady rock they had chipped away at for a decade. He backed away silently, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. The outrage was no longer a quiet pressure. It was a silent, focused rage. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't just going to let the dam break. He was going to dismantle it, stone by stone, and redirect the river. Have you ever had a moment where you realized the person you loved most was actually your biggest enemy? Tell us about that moment of clarity in the comments below. It's stories like these that remind us we're not alone. The discovery in the hallway didn't break him. It forged him. For the next 6 days, Kari operated with a chilling, methodical calm. He went to work. He came home. He cooked dinner. He kissed Marisa goodnight. He was playing the part of the devoted, oblivious husband, and he played it flawlessly. Inside, a different man was taking charge, a man who had been dormant for 10 years. The next morning, Thursday at 7:15 a.m., he called in sick to the mill for the first time in 5 years. A stomach bug, he told his supervisor. At 8:30 a.m., he was not at home in bed, but sitting in a leather armchair in a quiet, wood-paneled office on the top floor of a building overlooking the Reedy River. He was in the office of Ms. Evelyn Reed, Esquire. She was a legendary divorce attorney in the black community of Greenville, a sharp, elegant woman in her late 60s, with a reputation for being both compassionate and utterly ruthless. She charged $750 an hour, a sum that made Kari's stomach clench, but he knew he couldn't afford anything less. He had brought a single, worn leather briefcase. Inside was every financial document from his 10-year marriage. Tax returns, bank statements, deeds, pay stubs, credit card bills. He laid them out on her massive mahogany desk. Ms. Reed listened without interruption as he recounted the overheard phone call, his voice low and steady. He left out the emotion, presenting only the facts. When he finished, she looked at him over the top of her half-moon glasses. Her eyes were dark and intelligent. "They are planning a public execution," she said, her voice a deep, resonant alto. "And they expect you to play the part of the corpse." "I have no intention of doing so," Kari replied. "Good," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Now, let's look at your assets." For the next 3 hours, they went through everything. The North Main house, which she confirmed was his pre-marital property. His 401k from the mill, worth a respectable $188,000. And then he pulled out the last folder. "This is Weaver's Legacy, LLC," he said. Ms. Reed opened the folder. Inside were the articles of incorporation and the financial statements for a company Marisa and Lorraine knew nothing about. It was an inheritance from his father. The LLC owned 3 small commercial buildings in the village of West Greenville, a rapidly gentrifying arts district. They were unassuming brick buildings that housed a coffee shop, a small gallery, and a yoga studio. The net income after taxes and maintenance was a quiet, consistent $110,000 a year, which flowed directly into a separate bank account Kari had maintained since before his marriage. Ms. Reed's eyebrows shot up. "Your wife has no knowledge of this?" "None," Kari confirmed. "My father taught me to always keep something for yourself. He said, a man needs his own soil to stand on, no matter who shares his roof." "Your father was a very wise man," Ms. Reed said, her eyes gleaming. "This changes everything. This is not community property. This is your soil." She explained the strategy. They would immediately restructure the LLC, moving the assets into a newly formed trust with his sister, a teacher in Atlanta, as the trustee. It was a perfectly legal maneuver to shield his inheritance. Then, she pulled out the documents for Lorraine's mortgage. Kari had brought them, almost as an afterthought. Ms. Reed's smile widened. The silent guarantor. "Oh, Lorraine, you made a critical mistake." She explained that while he was on the hook to the bank, he had no obligation to Lorraine. He had been making supplemental payments to the principal for years, disguised as escrow adjustments, to keep her monthly payments artificially low. Without those, Lorraine's actual payment would be nearly $1,500 higher than what she was used to paying. "So, what do we do?" Kari asked. "We do nothing," Ms. Reed said. "You stop making those extra payments. You stop paying her property tax. You let the consequences of her own financial life arrive at her doorstep. But first," she picked up her pen, "we file. We file tomorrow morning. We get a docket number. We make you the petitioner. In the eyes of the court, you are the one who initiated this action. Her little birthday party stunt will be nothing more than theater, legally irrelevant." Kari felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about taking back the narrative. He spent the next few days in a state of suspended animation. He helped Marisa choose the caterer for his own ambush. He listened to her complain about the cost of flowers. He nodded when she showed him the cream-colored dress she'd bought for his public humiliation. He was a ghost in his own life, watching a movie play out. On Friday morning, the day of his birthday, Ms. Reed filed the divorce petition electronically at exactly 9:15 a.m. She sent him a text message with a single word: "Done." That evening, as he stood in their bedroom, knotting the tie Marisa had picked out for him, she came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You're going to have the best birthday ever," she whispered into his back. He looked at their reflection in the mirror. His face was a calm, unreadable mask. "I know," he said, and he meant it. The birthday party was a masterclass in sensory overload, every detail designed to showcase Lorraine's wealth and taste. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and gardenias, a fragrant assault that cost Lorraine's florist over $4,000. A string quartet played softly near the stone patio, their classical music a genteel backdrop for the clinking of glasses and the low hum of self-important conversation. Waitstaff in crisp white jackets moved silently through the guests, offering silver trays of delicate hors d'oeuvres, oysters Rockefeller, prosciutto-wrapped figs, miniature crab cakes that cost an estimated $80 per person. Kari stood on the perfectly manicured lawn, a silent observer in the center of the storm. He saw Stephen Covington, a banking executive, laughing with Marisa. He was wearing a $5,000 Rolex that glinted under the lights. He saw the wives of doctors and lawyers, their fingers heavy with rings, their necks adorned with pearls. They looked through him, their eyes scanning the crowd for someone more important to talk to. To them, he was just Marissa's husband, the foreman from the mill, a curious blue-collar specimen in their world of white-collar pedigree. He felt a hand on his arm. It was his brother-in-law, Marissa's older brother Michael, a decent man who worked as an architect in Charlotte. Michael had always been kind to him. "Happy birthday, man," Michael said, handing him a small, wrapped gift. "Sorry about the circus. You know how my mom gets." "It's her stage," Kari said with a small smile. "We're just the actors." Michael looked at him, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "You okay? You seem quiet tonight." "Just taking it all in," Kari replied. He was. He was memorizing every detail, every condescending smile, every dismissive glance. He was burning it all into his memory as fuel. Then came the toast. Marisa, radiant and cruel, standing before her audience. As she began to speak, Kari's senses narrowed. The background noise faded away. The world became a spotlight on his wife. He watched her lips form the words he already knew by heart. "He taught me what I don't want in life." He saw the flicker of shock on Michael's face. He saw the confusion ripple through the guests who weren't in on the plot. He saw the cold, smug satisfaction in the eyes of Lorraine's inner circle. "I'm filing for divorce." The silence, the vast, empty space created by her words. And then the sound, the sharp, solitary clap from Lorraine. It was the sound of a gavel falling, of a verdict delivered, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. Time seemed to slow down. He could feel the fine milled wool of his suit jacket on his arms. He could taste the dry, acidic tang of the champagne on his palate. He looked at Marisa's face, flushed with victory, her eyes shining with unshed, theatrical tears for the performance she was giving. She expected him to crumble. But Kari was no longer made of sand. He was made of iron forged in the fire of her betrayal. He let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment suffocate them. He let every single guest feel the excruciating awkwardness of what his wife and mother-in-law had done. He held Marisa's gaze, refusing to let her look away. And then he spoke. "Approved." The word was a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples of confusion were immediate. Marisa's triumphant expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice losing its confident ring. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed to deliver the facts. "I said, approved. My attorney filed the petition this morning at 9:15 a.m. The server should be at your mother's front door on Monday with your copy." He watched the color drain from her face. He saw her eyes dart to her mother. Lorraine's hands were frozen in midair, her smile now a grotesque rictus of disbelief. The power dynamic of the entire evening had just been inverted with 21 simple words. He was not the victim. He was the petitioner. He was not the footnote. He was the author of the next chapter. He calmly placed his glass on a nearby tray. He gave Michael a brief, firm nod. Then, without another word, he turned and walked through the stunned crowd. The path parted for him, as if he were a king. He walked down the long stone driveway, past the line of luxury cars, the Porsches, the Mercedes, the BMWs, and got into his 8-year-old Honda CR-V with 127,000 miles on the odometer. He started the engine, pulled out onto Augusta Road, and drove away. The sound of his own steady breathing the only sound in the car. He did not look back. The strike was not the single word uttered on the lawn. That was just the opening salvo. The real strike was a campaign of strategic silence, a series of calculated moves executed with the precision of a seasoned general. Kari did not shout or argue. He simply acted. The first consequence arrived at 10:32 a.m. the following Monday. A professional process server, a large man in a nondescript polo shirt, rang the doorbell of Lorraine's mansion. Marisa, who had stayed there since the disastrous party, answered the door, her face puffy from crying. She was handed a thick manila envelope. Inside were the divorce papers Kari had filed. The petition was cold, legal, and devastatingly efficient. It listed their assets and debts with brutal clarity, clearly delineating his premarital and inherited property, the house, the LLC, as his sole and separate property. Maurice's world, which had seemed so solid and powerful on Saturday night, began to dissolve. Her first call was to her own attorney, a high-priced downtown lawyer who charged $1,200 an hour. The news was not good. "He filed first," her lawyer explained, his voice devoid of sympathy. "He's the petitioner. It puts us on the defensive. And this LLC, if it's a premarital inheritance and you were never a party to it, and its funds were never commingled with marital assets, your claim to it is negligible at best. We can fight it, but it will be a long, expensive, and likely losing battle." The initial retainer to even begin that fight would be $50,000. Money Marissa did not have. The second phase of the strike was financial. Kari immediately had Marissa's name removed from their joint checking account, cutting off her access to his salary. He canceled the supplementary credit cards he paid for, including the Saks Fifth Avenue card she used for her wardrobe and the gas card for her BMW. The first sign of trouble came when her card was declined at a boutique where she was trying to buy a $450 pair of shoes. The humiliation was a small, bitter taste of what she had served him. But the main event, the strike that would shatter their world, was aimed at Lorraine. For 10 years, Kari had been the silent financial bedrock of her lavish lifestyle. He had not only co-signed her mortgage, but had been making quiet, additional payments of over $1,800 a month directly to the bank, paying down the principal and covering the majority of her property taxes and insurance through the escrow account. Lorraine only paid a small, manageable portion, believing it to be the full amount. On the 1st of October, Kari simply stopped. He made his own mortgage payment. He paid his own bills. He did nothing for Lorraine. For a month, nothing happened. Then, in early November, a crisp white envelope with a window from the bank arrived at the Augusta Road Manor. It was a notice of delinquency. The payment due on October 1st was unpaid, and a late fee of $250 had been assessed. Lorraine saw it and scoffed. "Kari must have forgotten in all this drama," she told Marissa. "He always handles this. I'll call him and tell him to fix his mistake." She called. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her tone imperious. "Kari, it's Lorraine. The bank sent some silly notice. You need to call them and clear it up immediately. This is exactly the kind of sloppiness I'm talking about." He saved the message. Another month passed. Now it was December. A second notice arrived, this one more severe. The account was now 60 days past due. The festive season was in full swing, but a cold dread was beginning to seep into the opulent manor. Marissa's BMW lease payment was also 60 days past due. A letter threatening repossession had arrived. The final blow landed a week before Christmas. A certified letter. Lorraine had to sign for it at the door. Her hands, usually steady as she held a champagne flute, trembled slightly as she tore it open. Inside, printed in stark black letters, were the words she never thought she would see: notice of intent to foreclose. The bank was exercising its right under the guarantor clause. Because of the default, the entire remaining balance of the loan, $854,212.38, was now due. If it was not paid within 30 days, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings to seize and sell the property. Her world collapsed. The house was not just a home. It was her identity. It was her status, her social standing, the stage for her entire life. Losing it meant losing everything. The frantic, pleading voicemails began. This time when Marissa called, her voice was stripped of all its previous arrogance. "Kari, please call me back. My mother, she's a wreck. The house. Her house. You can't let this happen. The party was a mistake. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please just fix it. I'll do anything. Lorraine's message came an hour later. It was the sound of a queen who had been utterly dethroned. The voice was thick with tears. Kari, I'm begging you. I am begging. Don't do this to me. Everything I have is in this house. My memories, your father-in-law's memories. Please, I'll apologize. I'll get on my knees. Just make the payment. We can work this out. Kari listened to the messages in the quiet of his office at the mill, the hum of the machinery, a steady rhythm in the background. He felt nothing, not joy, not satisfaction, not even anger. He felt only the profound, empty peace of a debt being settled. He saved the voicemails, archived them with the others, and went back to work. Have you ever had to make a hard decision to protect your own peace, even if it meant letting someone else face the consequences of their actions? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could give someone else the strength they need. The collapse was not a single event, but a cascade of failures, each one a direct consequence of a life built on arrogance and someone else's money. The downfall of Lorraine and Marisa became a quiet, cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties along Augusta Road. First went the house. Lorraine, in a desperate panic, could not produce the $854,000 required to satisfy the bank. She had no savings to speak of. Every dollar that came in was spent on maintaining her image. She was forced into a short sale. The magnificent $1.2 million manor, the epicenter of her social universe, sold in a rush for just $910,000 to a surgeon new to town. After the outstanding mortgage, realtor commissions, and closing costs were paid, Lorraine was left with a check for $17,345. A lifetime of accumulated status, liquidated into the price of a used sedan. Her beautiful $65,000 Mercedes-Benz E-Class was next. She could no longer afford the $980 monthly payment, let alone the insurance. She sold it for a fraction of its worth and bought a 10-year-old Hyundai Elantra for $8,000 cash. The sight of Lorraine, once the queen of the charity gala circuit, pulling up to the grocery store in a faded silver Hyundai, became a symbol of her spectacular fall from grace. She moved into a cramped 800-square-foot one-bedroom apartment complex off Wade Hampton Boulevard, a place with thin walls and the constant smell of her neighbors' cooking. The rent was $1,300 a month, a devastating blow to her now non-existent income. Her former friends stopped calling. Without her grand stage for entertaining, she was no longer of any use to them. Marisa's life unraveled in parallel. The white BMW 3 Series was repossessed in the dead of night from the parking lot of her mother's new apartment. One morning it was there. The next, it was gone, leaving only a small oil stain on the asphalt. The public humiliation was profound. Her job as a paralegal, which had always been more of a social position than a career, became untenable. Her performance suffered as she was consumed by stress and legal battles. After being reprimanded for missing key deadlines, she was quietly let go. Her $58,000 salary vanished. With a wrecked credit score and no financial support from Kari, her options were bleak. She eventually found work as a receptionist at a dental practice in a strip mall, earning $19 an hour. Her gross annual income was now just under $40,000. The world of Louis Vuitton and Christian Louboutin was replaced by the world of the Target clearance rack. Her once luminous skin seemed dull, her eyes perpetually shadowed with exhaustion and regret. The divorce itself was finalized 8 months after the birthday party. The judge, having reviewed the evidence, including the timeline of the filing and the nature of Kari's inherited LLC, sided entirely with Kari. Marisa was awarded no alimony. She received no portion of Weaver's Legacy LLC. She had no claim to the North Main house. The final decree declared that she was entitled to half of the marital 401k contributions made during their marriage, which amounted to a one-time payment of $42,500. After paying her attorney's final bill of $38,000, she was left with just a few $1,000s. The social consequences were just as brutal. The story of the birthday party toast had spread like wildfire. But the narrative had flipped. Marisa and Lorraine were not seen as empowered women taking control, but as cruel, calculating bullies who had publicly tried to humiliate a good man. Kari, in his stoic silence and quiet dignity, had become a sympathetic figure. People who had once looked through him now nodded at him with respect when they saw him at the grocery store. The very community Marisa and Lorraine had tried to impress had turned on them completely. They were pariahs, ghosts haunting the fringes of a world that had once been their kingdom. They had lost everything, not because Kari had taken it from them, but because they had thrown it all away in a single, spectacular act of hubris. A year and a half later, the dust had settled, and a new landscape had emerged. Kari stood in the cavernous main room of the Greenville textile mill, the rhythmic clatter of the looms, a comforting and familiar sound. The air smelled of cotton and machine oil, the scent of his family's history, of his own hard work. His life was his own now, fully and completely. The North Main house felt warmer, more peaceful. He had painted the living room a calm, earthy green, and filled the bookshelves with books on history and engineering instead of Marisa's fashion magazines. The silence was no longer empty. It was serene. Weaver's Legacy, LLC, was thriving. The properties in the village of West Greenville had appreciated in value, and the income was steady. But Kari wasn't saving it for himself. He had met with Ms. Reed, not as a client, but as a collaborator. Together, they had established the Greenville Textile Heritage Scholarship. That spring, he stood on a small stage in the mill's break room, a space decorated with balloons and a handmade banner. Before him were 5 young people, the sons and daughters of the men and women he worked with every day. Their parents, whose luminous, deep brown skin shone with pride, stood behind them. Kari, in his simple work polo and khakis, announced the first 5 recipients of the scholarship. Each student would receive $10,000 to pursue a college degree or vocational training. He watched as a mother, a woman who had worked the looms for 30 years, wept with joy as her daughter accepted the oversized check. In that moment, Kari understood the meaning of true wealth. It wasn't in a house on Augusta Road or a German luxury car. It was in this. It was in the ability to change a life, to plant a seed in the community that had raised him, to use his father's legacy to build a future for others. His $62,000 salary paid his bills. The $110,000 from the LLC, once a secret defense, was now a tool for building and giving back. His weekends were quiet. He spent them walking the trails in Falls Park on the Reedy, the gentle roar of the waterfall, a constant comfort. He'd sit on a bench and watch families laugh and play, feeling a sense of connection to his city that he'd never felt when he was living Marisa's life. He was a black man in the South, a son of this soil, and he was finally putting down his own roots in his own way. One Sunday, as the sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the river, he saw a familiar figure walking towards him. It was Marisa. She was thinner, and the expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple puff. She looked her age. She stopped a few feet from his bench. "Kari," she said, her voice quiet. "Marisa?" he replied, his tone even, not unkind. "I heard about the scholarships," she said. "That was a good thing you did?" "It felt right," he said. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was a fool," she whispered. My mother and I, we were so caught up in what things looked like, we forgot what they were worth. I had a good man, a good life, and I burned it to the ground for nothing, for applause from people who don't even speak to me anymore. He listened, and for the first time he saw not a villain, but a sad, lost woman who had been taught a terrible lesson. He felt a flicker of the old affection, buried under layers of pain. But it was like remembering a character from a book he'd read long ago. "I am so sorry, Kari," she said, the words finally sounding genuine. He stood up and looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the wreckage of their shared past, but he felt no anger. He had moved on. "I forgive you, Marisa," he said. The forgiveness wasn't for her. It was the last stone he needed to remove from his own heart. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He walked away, leaving her by the river, and headed home. True wealth isn't about what you own. It's about who you are when everything is taken away. It's about character, dignity, and the legacy you build not with money, but with kindness and integrity. It's the quiet peace of a Sunday walk, the shared pride in a community's success, and the knowledge that you are the architect of a life of your own choosing. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride. Your support helps us continue to share stories of resilience, justice, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life.